My three ungrateful children decided to get rid of me once and for all. They left my husband Antonio and me on a deserted road, abandoning us to our fate under the scorching sun. "You are a burden we can no longer bear," they said before speeding off in their black Mercedes and disappearing over the horizon. Days later, when the secret we had guarded so tightly finally came to light, it was they who came back humbled and begging for forgiveness. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories reach. It all began on a Thursday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee for everyone, just as I had done for more than 40 years. At 72, my hands were no longer as steady, but I could still fry eggs and brew a cup of coffee that Jose always said was the best in the world. That morning, however, there was a heaviness in the air, a tension I knew well after months of living with our three children in the house that was once only ours. I felt Claudia's footsteps before I saw her. My eldest daughter entered the kitchen still in her robe, her face shut tight like a locked door. "Mom, how many eggs are you frying?" The question came loaded with accusation. "Just 4, honey, one for each of us." She sighed dramatically and threw a pile of bills onto the table. I immediately recognized Jose's medical prescriptions. My husband had suffered from heart problems for years, and the medications were our biggest expense. $600, Mom. 600. "Do you know how much that is in my monthly budget?" I didn't reply. The words stuck in my throat like fish bones. At that moment, Jose appeared in the doorway, walking slowly, leaning on the walls. At 75, every step was a battle. His once lively face was now marked with a sadness that broke my heart. "Good morning, daughter," he said, trying to smile. Claudia didn't even respond. She grabbed a piece of bread, spread butter on it angrily, and left the kitchen as if we were contaminated with some infectious disease. We sat at the table in silence, eating slowly. I looked at Jose and saw tears forming in the corners of his tired eyes. This man had built this house with his own hands, brick by brick. He had worked 6 days a week for 4 decades to give our children everything we could offer. And now we were treated like intruders in our own home. "They're right," Teresa Jose murmured, staring at his plate. "We're becoming too much trouble." Before I could answer, Ricardo entered the kitchen, still in his night shift uniform from the factory. My middle son had always been the peacemaker, the balanced one. But his face showed the same exhaustion, the same irritation I had seen in Claudia. "Dad." "Mom, I need to talk to you." He sat down heavily, rubbing his calloused hands over his face. "This situation can't go on. You've seen the medical bills, right, son? We can try to cut back on the medications," Jose replied, his voice trembling. "We can talk to the doctor about cheaper alternatives." Ricardo shook his head. "It's not just that. It's everything. The food, the electricity, the space. This house can't accommodate 5 adults anymore. And what do you suggest?" I asked, though. I already knew the answer. "There's a place, a home for the elderly. It's not one of the worst. You'd have medical assistance and the company of people your own age. You're talking about putting us in a home?" Jose's voice came out in a frightened whisper. "It's not being put away, Dad. It's an opportunity for a life more suited to your age." I felt the world collapse around me. This house held our memories, our dreams, the scent of our children when they were little. Every corner told the story of a lifetime of work and love. Fernando, our youngest son at 34, appeared in the doorway still in his pajamas, even though it was past 11 in the morning. "Are you talking about a nursing home? It's about time." "I can't sleep with Dad's coughing in the middle of the night." "It's not a home," Ricardo corrected without much conviction. "Doesn't matter what you call it. My girlfriend won't even come here. She's embarrassed. The word hit me like a slap in the face. Our existence embarrassed people. Jose slowly stood up and walked out to the small backyard. I knew he was going to cry where no one could see him. He had always been that way. He carried his pain in silence to protect others. We need an answer. Soon, said Claudia, returning to the kitchen, already dressed for work. I've scheduled a visit to the home for tomorrow. In the following weeks, the atmosphere in the house became unbearable. Our children no longer spoke to us unless it was strictly necessary. They came and went like irritated guests in a bad hotel. Jose barely ate, losing visible weight. I woke up every morning with a knot in my stomach, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. And it did on a Tuesday while I was hanging laundry on the line. I heard hushed voices in the living room and crept closer. Is everything set? Claudia's voice. Are they coming to pick them up this afternoon? Yes, Ricardo replied. Everything's arranged with the home. And if they don't want to go? Fernando asked. They'll go, Ricardo said coldly, sending a chill down my spine. Because they have no choice. Did you tell them it's temporary? Claudia asked. Of course it's not temporary. Fernando chuckled quietly. Do you know any elderly person who's ever come back from a home? My world crumbled in that instant. I leaned against the wall so I wouldn't fall. They were planning to get rid of us forever, like old furniture that no longer matched the decor. I ran to the garden where Jose was watering the plants with mechanical movements. Jose whispered, grabbing his arm, they're coming for us today. They're not going to visit us anymore after that. Jose dropped the hose. The water kept flowing, soaking his feet. Without even telling us, he murmured, his voice a groan. They don't want us anymore, Jose. Never again. We held each other right there, crying like lost children. A whole life of sacrifice, and this was how it ended. 2 hours later, the people from the nursing home arrived. 2 women in white uniforms with professional smiles and sweet but empty words. Our children faked sorrow for the staff, promising weekly visits, daily calls. We got into the van without looking back. Through the window, I saw Ricardo, Claudia, and Fernando rush back into the house, like criminals fleeing the scene of a crime. Teresa, Jose whispered, holding my hand. How did we end up like this? I had no answer, only silent tears streaming down my face as the van drove away from the home we had built with so much love. At that moment, we had no idea that fate was about to deliver its own blow of justice. Hidden in Jose's old wallet between faded photos and yellowed cards was an envelope that would change everything. The nursing home was exactly what I had feared. An old building with the smell of disinfectant and urine barely masked by cheap air fresheners. They put us in a shared room with 6 other people, separated only by a flimsy curtain that offered almost no privacy. It was a place where people went to die, slowly abandoned by the families who once swore to love them until the end. The nights were the worst. The constant moaning of the other elderly residents, the muffled crying into pillows, the calls for children who would never come. Jose hardly ate. He was visibly wasting away. I watched him every morning, seeing how his body shrank, how the light in his eyes faded more with each passing day. Teresa, he whispered on the 3rd night, when I thought he was asleep. I can't bear to stay here. I held his hand under the rough bedsheet. We were in separate beds, but we would stretch out our arms to keep contact, something as essential as air after 50 years of marriage. I know my love. I can't either. Did the kids call? He asked, though he already knew the answer. No, I replied, feeling the pain in the words. They didn't call. A week passed, then another. No calls, no visits. It was as if we had died the moment we got into that van. The staff avoided our eyes whenever we asked if there were any messages for us. In the third week, Jose had a crisis in the middle of the night. I woke up to his muffled groan and found him clutching his chest, his face twisted in pain. "Jose," I cried, jumping out of bed to help him. "Help someone, please. Help us." The nurse on duty took nearly 10 minutes to arrive. When she finally did, she wore the bored expression of someone who had seen this scene too many times. "It's probably just indigestion," she said, without even examining him properly. "It's not indigestion," I insisted. "He has heart problems. He needs a hospital." After much insistence, they called an ambulance. I waited alone in the emergency room for hours, my hands trembling with fear and rage. I tried to call our children, but none of them answered. I left desperate messages begging them to come. No one came. The doctor appeared around 5 in the morning, his face serious. "Mrs. Teresa, your husband, had a heart attack. We managed to stabilize him, but his condition is delicate. Will he survive?" I could barely form the question. "For now, yes, but he'll need intensive care for the next few days." I spent the entire night sitting beside Jose's bed in the ICU, watching the monitors, counting every heartbeat like it was a precious treasure. From time to time, he opened his eyes and tried to smile at me, but would soon drift back to sleep under the effects of the medication. The next morning, still without any word from our children, I went to the hospital bathroom to wash my face. I was exhausted, disheveled, my eyes swollen from so much crying. As I dried my face, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She seemed like a stranger, someone who had aged decades in just a few weeks. When I returned to the room, I found a young nurse checking Jose's vital signs. "Are you his wife?" she asked. "Yes, we've been married for 50 years. She smiled gently, adjusting Jose's pillow with care. "That's beautiful. We rarely see couples who've been together for so long." Something in the way she spoke and how she cared for Jose touched me deeply. It was the first genuine act of humanity we had received in weeks. "What's your name?" I asked. "Clara," she replied. "Clara Oliveira." In the days that followed, Clara became our guardian angel at the hospital. She always showed up in the room, even when she wasn't assigned to care for Jose. She brought kind words, adjusted the blankets, and sometimes even brought me a cup of coffee when she noticed I hadn't moved in hours. One day while Jose was asleep, she sat next to me. "Mrs. Teresa, forgive me for intruding, but your children, they don't visit you." I shook my head, feeling the knot in my throat tighten. They put us in a nursing home and never came back." Clara was silent for a moment, her eyes filling with tears. "You know, my mother works as a caregiver for the elderly. The stories she tells, they're heartbreaking." "I understand," I replied, though in truth I didn't. How could anyone truly understand the pain of being abandoned by their own children? Actually, she continued, "My husband Paulo and I have been talking a lot about that lately." I didn't understand where she was going at first. About what exactly? About how much we wish we had grandparents in our lives. Mine passed away when I was little, and Paulo's parents live overseas. We miss that wisdom, that presence that only elders can offer. I remained silent, unsure how to respond. Clara continued, hesitant. "We have an extra room at home. It's not much, but it's cozy. And I work here at the hospital. I can keep an eye on Jose's health. Paulo runs a small repair shop. He works from home. You would never be alone." My heart began to race. Could it be that this young woman, practically a stranger, was offering us what our own children had denied? "Clara, are you inviting us to live with you?" She blushed, suddenly embarrassed. "I'm sorry if I sound intrusive. It's just that, well, Paulo and I have talked a lot about it. We believe we could help each other. You'd have a home, and we'd have the family we've always wanted. Tears streamed freely down my face. I didn't know what to say. It was a miracle in the midst of despair, a beacon in the darkness our lives had become. That night, when Jose woke up more lucid, I told him about Clara's offer. I saw his eyes fill with tears, the first glimmer of hope lighting up his face in weeks. "They don't even know us, Teresa," he whispered. "Why would they do that for us? Maybe there are good people in the world, after all?" I said, holding his hand. "People who see value where our own children only saw a burden." A week later, when Jose was discharged, we didn't return to the nursing home. Clara and Paulo came to pick us up from the hospital. Paulo was a tall, slender young man with a warm smile and work-hardened hands. They welcomed us into their small but immaculate apartment, where they had prepared a room just for us with a double-bed floral curtains and even a vase of violets on the windowsill. "It's not much, but it's our home," Paulo said, helping Jose get settled. "And now it's your home too." That first night lying beside Jose in the soft bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. He held my hand like he had every night for 50 years. "Teresa," he whispered in the dark, "maybe God hasn't abandoned us after all." I smiled, though he couldn't see me in the darkness. "Maybe not, my love. Maybe not." The days that followed were full of adjustment and discovery. Clara worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, but always came home smiling, asking about our day. Paulo worked in a small workshop he had set up in the building's garage, repairing electronic devices. Sometimes, Jose would go down to keep him company, watching him work, chatting about the times when he used to fix things around our house. I started cooking again, something I had always loved. I made lunch for everyone, baked cakes and bread that Paulo and Clara devoured with sincere praise. For the first time in a long while, I felt useful, valued. One afternoon, while washing the lunch dishes, I found something in the pocket of Jose's old jacket, which I had set aside for washing. It was a yellowed envelope with the letterhead of a law firm. It looked like it had been there for a long time, forgotten. I opened it carefully and began to read its contents. My heart nearly stopped. My hands trembled so much I could barely hold the papers. I read and reread each word in disbelief. According to the document, my father, who had passed away more than 10 years ago, had left a substantial inheritance managed by a law firm. They had tried to contact us several times at our old address without success. The inheritance included 10 properties in the city center, all rented out, and a cash sum that with accrued interest exceeded $20 million. $20 million. More money than Jose and I ever dreamed of having in our entire working lives. I sat down in the kitchen chair, my legs trembling. How had that envelope ended up in Jose's jacket? Why had we never seen it before? Then, like a bolt of lightning, realization struck me. The letters must have arrived at our old house when we were already living with our children. They must have intercepted everything. I waited for Jose to return from the workshop with Paulo to show him the document. When he read it, his expression shifted from disbelief to realization and finally to rage. "They knew Teresa," he said. "Our children knew about this money, and still they treated us like garbage." Clara and Paulo were in the living room when we told them about the discovery. Their reaction wasn't one of greed or scheming, as it might have been for many others upon discovering they were housing 2 suddenly wealthy elderly people. It was genuine outrage at the injustice we had suffered. "You need to contact that lawyer immediately," Clara said, picking up the phone. "Tomorrow we'll go to his office." The next morning, we walked into the office of Dr. Mendez, an older gentleman with gray hair and gold-rimmed glasses. He greeted us with a look of relief. "Mr. Jose and Mrs. Teresa, finally. We've been trying to find you for years. We even hired a private investigator, but he couldn't locate you after you left your previous residence. Our children," Jose said, his voice trembling with contained anger. They must have intercepted the letters. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, visibly uncomfortable. It's possible. We did receive some calls from people claiming to be your children asking about the inheritance. Naturally, we didn't provide any details without the presence of the legitimate heirs. We spent the next few hours signing documents, updating records, and listening to explanations about how to access our assets. In the end, Dr. Mendez handed us a provisional bank card. This card is linked to one of the current accounts. I've set a daily limit of $50,000 for withdrawals and transfers until we regularize all the documentation. $50,000, a sum that once would have seemed like an unimaginable fortune. Now it was just a daily limit. We left the office in silence, absorbing the drastic change in our situation. In the taxi on the way home, Jose squeezed my hand tightly. What are we going to do now, Teresa? I looked out the window, watching the city go by. First, we stay with Clara and Paulo. They took us in when we had nothing. They deserve our loyalty. Jose nodded. And our children, they'll find out sooner or later. I felt a knot form in my throat. As fresh as the pain of abandonment still was, they were our children, our flesh and blood. We'll wait. They'll come looking for us once they know. And indeed, it didn't take long. 2 weeks after settling everything with the lawyer, we were having breakfast when the intercom rang. Paulo answered and returned with a tense look. Mrs. Teresa, it's your children, all 3 of them. They say they urgently need to talk to you. I exchanged a look with Jose. We expected this? Just not so soon. Clara stood up, instinctively protective. Do you want me to send them away? Jose shook his head. No. We'll hear what they have to say. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my own children, all impeccably dressed, as if attending an important business meeting. Claudia wore expensive jewelry, Ricardo flaunted a watch that probably cost several salaries, and Fernando had on a designer shirt he could never afford with the little he worked. Mama! Claudia stepped forward to hug me, but I instinctively stepped back. We were so worried. We looked for you everywhere. The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly, I almost believed it, if not for the calculating look in her eyes that she could never hide from me. Where did you look? Jose asked, his calm tone masking the storm within. At the nursing home where you abandoned us? Ricardo adopted his usual conciliatory tone. Dad, it was all a misunderstanding. We went to visit a week later, but they told us you had run away, and you didn't think to call the police. The hospitals? You weren't worried that we might be dead on the side of a road somewhere? The 3 of them looked at each other, uncomfortable. The truth, Jose continued, is that you're only here because you found out about the money. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Claudia let out a theatrical sigh. Fine, let's be honest. Yes, we found out about the inheritance, and we came because we want to resolve this situation as a family. As a family, it was my turn to speak, my voice trembling with contained emotion. The same family that threw us away like trash, that intercepted our letters for years, that planned to abandon us forever in a house of horrors. Fernando, always the most impatient, jumped in. Look, we made a mistake. Okay, everyone makes mistakes, but we're your children. That money belongs to the family. Family? The word sounded like a cruel joke. You know whose family Clara and Paulo. 2 young people who didn't know us at all, but took us in when we were alone and desperate. Who cared for us when Jose nearly died of sorrow and abandonment. They are family. Clara and Paulo, who were quietly observing from a corner of the room, looked embarrassed by the recognition. Ricardo studied them with a calculating gaze. So that's it. You've traded your own children for 2 strangers, opportunists who are obviously after the inheritance. Paulo stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. We didn't even know about the inheritance until 2 days ago when they told us. We took them in because that's what decent people do. Claudia let out a bitter laugh. How touching. But let's be realistic. That money belongs to our family, not to strangers who suddenly appeared. I looked at my children trying to find even a trace of the love I once believed they had for us. But I found nothing, only greed and calculation. In contrast, I looked at Clara and Paolo, who had given us a home when we had nothing to offer in return. The decision had been made long before I even realized it. You're right about one thing, I finally said. The money belongs to the family, and we choose who our family is now. My children's faces twisted into expressions of shock and fury. Ricardo was the first to compose himself. Mom, you can't be serious. We're your children, your blood. Blood, Jose murmured. What's the use of blood when there's no love? Fernando, always the most volatile, stepped forward threateningly. You can't do this. That money is ours by right. Paolo stepped between us and Fernando, instinctively protecting us. I think it's time for you to leave. Not before we settle this, Claudia shouted. We'll sue. We'll prove you're not mentally fit to manage this money. That was the last straw. The idea that they would try to declare us incompetent just to get their hands on the inheritance showed how low they were willing to sink. Get out of our house, I said with the firmest voice I'd ever had. Now. The three of them stood frozen for a moment, stunned by my determination. Then, like a storm finally breaking loose, they began shouting accusations, threats, promises to come back. Paolo called the building security, who politely but firmly escorted my children out. Before leaving, Claudia turned around one last time, her eyes burning with rage. This isn't over. You'll regret it. When the door finally closed, I felt my legs give out. Jose held me as we cried together, not over the threats, but over the final death of the last illusions we had ever held about our children. That night, lying beside Jose, I reflected on the path our life had taken. Did we do everything wrong, Jose? Did we fail as parents? He sighed deeply, gently stroking my gray hair. No, Teresa. We gave them love, education, values. They chose their path. We can't blame ourselves for that. And now, what do we do with all this money? We live, Teresa. We live the years we have left with dignity and purpose, and we help those who truly deserve to be helped. I fell asleep with those words echoing in my mind, imagining the possibilities that now lay before us. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a bleak horizon of abandonment and loneliness, but an open field of hope. The following months were transformative. With part of the money, we bought a large apartment in the same building where Clara and Paolo lived. We insisted they move in with us, forming a family, not by blood, but by choice. At first, they hesitated. Mrs. Teresa Clara said, "You don't owe us anything. We did what anyone with a heart would do." "That's exactly why we want you close," I replied. "Because hearts like yours are rare." The apartment had 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room, with a view of the city park, and a large kitchen, where I once again took pleasure in cooking for everyone. Jose got a corner on the balcony for his plants, which bloomed along with his renewed spirit. Paolo set up a better workshop in the building with new equipment we bought him. His repair business quickly grew, and he soon hired 2 assistants. Clara continued working at the hospital, but reduced her hours to have more time with us. Our new life felt like a dream after the nightmare we had endured. But the shadow of the past still haunted us. Our children didn't give up easily. First came the letters from lawyers claiming we weren't mentally fit to manage our estate. Dr. Mendez, our attorney, handled them all with medical evaluations proving our sanity. Then they tried to confront us in public. One day, while shopping at the mall, Claudia appeared by chance, pretending to be surprised to see us. "Mom, Dad, What a wonderful coincidence. Jose squeezed my hand tightly, and Clara instinctively stood by our side. Paolo, who was pushing the shopping cart, stopped as if facing a venomous snake. "What do you want, Claudia?" I asked bluntly. She tried to maintain a forced smile, though her eyes betrayed restrained fury. "I just wanted to see how you're doing. I miss you." "You miss our money? You mean," Jose replied with a frankness that surprised me. Claudia's smile vanished like ice in the sun. "That's not fair, Dad. We're family." "We were," I corrected her. "Now we have a new family, one that values us for who we are, not what we have." Clara and Paolo stayed silent, but their steady presence beside us said more than any words. Claudia looked at them with barely concealed contempt. "These opportunists turned you against your own children. Can't you see you're being manipulated?" It was Paolo who responded with a calm that contrasted with the fire in his eyes. "The only manipulation I see is yours, trying to guilt-trip your parents after everything you did." We left the mall quickly after that encounter, feeling Claudia's gaze follow us like a frustrated predator. On the way home, Jose remained silent, his face tense and pale. "Jose," I called, worried. "Are you feeling unwell?" He shook his head, but I saw a lone tear run down his wrinkled cheek. "It's just that, as much as I know they did wrong, it hurts to see they've become these people." That night was difficult. Jose had nightmares, waking up several times, calling out for the children. I held him, trying to chase away the ghosts, haunting him, but I knew some wounds were too deep to heal completely. The following week, I received an unexpected call. It was Sonia, Ricardo's wife. We had always had a cordial, though never close relationship. She sounded nervous on the phone. "Mrs. Teresa, can I meet with you to talk?" "Just the two of us." I hesitated, fearing another trap from my children, but something in her voice felt sincere. "All right, but let's meet in a public place." We met at a cafe downtown. Sonia looked worn down with deep under-eye circles and trembling hands as she held her coffee cup. She waited for the waiter to leave before speaking. "I came without Ricardo knowing. If he finds out I'm here—" "What's going on, Sonia?" She took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "Things have been complicated since you left. At first, I truly thought you had willingly gone to the nursing home. Ricardo said it was best for everyone, that you'd be better cared for there." I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. "When I found out you had escaped, I panicked. I wanted to call the police, the hospitals, but Ricardo, he said you were fine, that you had decided to live on your own, and you believed him." She shook her head, ashamed. "Not entirely. But he's my husband, and I never imagined—" "You never imagined they abandoned us to die." Sonia covered her face with her hands, silently crying. "Forgive me, Mrs. Teresa. I should have done more. I should have insisted." I felt my anger soften slightly in the face of the broken woman before me. "Why are you telling me this now?" She wiped her tears with a napkin. "Because I can't take it anymore. Since they found out about the inheritance, they've been obsessed. That's all they talk about, how to get the money. I don't recognize my husband anymore. And your children? How are they?" The mention of my grandchildren triggered another wave of tears. "The kids ask about you, they miss you." But Ricardo forbade them from talking about it. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My grandchildren forbidden even to speak our names. "What do you want from me, Sonia?" She took a deep breath, finally getting to the point. "I want to ask you not to cut ties with your grandchildren completely. They aren't to blame for their parents' choices." It was a fair request. The children truly weren't at fault. "But how can I see them if Ricardo won't even let them mention us? I could bring them to visit you when he's at work." The proposal was tempting, but risky. "Wouldn't that put you in danger?" Sonia gave a sad smile. Some things are worth the risk, Mrs. Teresa. The children need to know they still have grandparents who love them. After nearly an hour of conversation, we agreed that Sonia would bring the grandchildren to visit us the following Sunday, while Ricardo would be at a soccer game with his friends. I returned home filled with conflicting emotions. Joy at the thought of reuniting with my grandchildren mixed with fear of more pain, more conflict. When I told Jose, I saw his eyes light up for the first time in days. The grandkids, Teresa. We're going to see our grandkids. Clara and Paolo supported us, though, cautiously. We need to make sure it's not a trap, Paolo said. How about I stay nearby during the visit just to be sure? On the agreed Sunday, I cleaned the apartment as if preparing to receive royalty. I made cookies, a chocolate cake, bought soda, and prepared sweets. Jose paced back and forth like a nervous teenager before his first date. When the doorbell rang, my heart almost leapt out of my chest. Paolo cautiously opened the door. Sonia entered with Miguel, 10 years old, and Nina, 7. The children looked confused and intimidated. Grandma, Miguel called hesitantly, searching for me with his eyes. I couldn't hold back my tears. I opened my arms, and both ran to me, burying their faces in my chest, like they used to when they were younger. Jose joined the embrace, laughing and crying at the same time. Grandpa, why did you disappear? Nina asked with that brutally honest innocence only children have. Dad said you didn't want to see us anymore. Jose swallowed hard, trying to hide his anger. That's not true, my princess. We never stopped loving you. Never. Miguel, always the more observant one, looked around with curiosity. This house is really cool. Is it yours? Yes, I replied, thankful for the change in subject. Would you like to see it? The hours that followed were pure joy. We showed them the apartment, told them stories, played board games we had bought just for the occasion. The children devoured the sweets and asked for more. Clara and Paolo blended in naturally, as if they had been part of the family for years. When it was time to leave, none of us wanted the visit to end. Miguel hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear. Grandma, can I come back again? I promised not to tell Dad. My heart ached. Of course, my love. This house will always be open to you. Sonia promised to bring them back when it was safe. After they left, Jose and I embraced in silence, processing the emotional roller coaster that afternoon had been. They're ours, he whispered. No one can take this away from us. That visit was like water in the desert for our souls dried by the pain of abandonment. It gave us strength to keep going, to look beyond suffering and see the possibility of happiness. The following week, we began to put into motion a plan that had been forming in our minds for some time. Using part of the inheritance, we bought a large house on the outskirts of the city with spacious open land. We talked to Clara about transforming the place into a home for abandoned elderly people, not a storage facility for the unwanted, like the one we escaped from, but a real home. A place where the elderly could live with dignity, with quality medical care activities and attention. Clara was enthusiastic about the idea. I can coordinate the healthcare part. I know nurses and caregivers who'd be perfect for this project. Paolo suggested including a workshop for elderly residents who wanted to stay active. Many still have amazing skills and just need a space to use them. And so, Hogar Nueva Vida New Life Home was born, our way of giving back. Not out of revenge against our children, but as a way to transform our pain into something positive so others like us wouldn't have to suffer the same hell. Hogar Nueva Vida quickly became the center of our lives. We hired a team of professionals led by Clara, nurses, caregivers, physical therapists, nutritionists. Paolo oversaw maintenance and the craft workshops. Jose tended to the garden, teaching other elders how to grow flowers and vegetables. And I ran the kitchen, making sure every meal was tasty and nutritious, just like I always did for my family. Our first resident was Doña Conchezón, an 80-year-old woman we rescued from the same place we had fled. When we found her, she was thin, apathetic, almost defeated. Her children visited once a year at Christmas out of obligation. At Hogar Nueva Vida, Doña Conchezón regained her spark. We discovered she used to be a piano teacher, so we got her an instrument so she could play again. Then came Don Alberto, a 78-year-old former carpenter, abandoned in a hospital after a mild stroke. His family never returned after he was discharged. In Paulo's workshop, Don Alberto rediscovered the joy of working with wood even with his physical limitations. Soon, he was teaching other elders to make small items, photo frames, boxes, toys. Within 6 months, the home had 15 residents each with their own story of abandonment, each finding new purpose. We transformed suffering into a mission, and that brought us a peace we never thought possible. Visits from our grandchildren continued always in secret. Miguel and Nina loved coming to the home where they played with their bonus grandparents, as they affectionately called the residents. Sonia became an important ally, helping us stay connected with the children without Ricardo knowing. One day, however, the inevitable happened. We were having lunch with the grandchildren at the home when a familiar car screeched into the parking lot. Ricardo stepped out, slamming the door, his face twisted in rage. "I knew it! I knew you were betraying me!" he shouted at Sonia, who instantly went pale. The children ran to me, frightened by their father's outburst. Jose stood up, leaning on the cane he used on days when his legs hurt badly. Ricardo calmed down. The children only came to visit their grandparents. Grandparents, he spat the word like poison. "You're nothing to us anymore. You chose money over family." "We chose money." Jose's voice trembled, not with fear, but with indignation. "You're the ones who abandoned us when you thought we had nothing. You're the ones who hid our letters, who lied, who threw us into a place to die." Ricardo stepped forward threateningly, but Paulo and 2 home employees stepped between us. "Leave now," Paulo said with calm authority, "or we'll call the police." "The police?" Ricardo laughed bitterly. "For what? Wanting to protect my children from manipulative old people." At that moment, Miguel stepped forward, standing up to his father with a courage surprising for a 10-year-old. "Dad, you're lying. Grandpa and Grandma never manipulated us. You're the one who won't let us see them." Ricardo looked stunned by his son's words. For a moment, I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes, but it quickly vanished, replaced by his usual rage. "To the car, all of you. Now." The children cried, begging to stay a little longer. Sonia tried to calm them, promising they'd return, but I could see in Ricardo's hard stare that he would do everything in his power to prevent that. Before leaving, Ricardo stopped at the door, pointing at us like a threat. "This isn't over. You'll see. No one steals my children from me." After they left, I collapsed into a chair, feeling the weight of all 72 years on my shoulders. Jose came over, placing his hand on my shoulder. "They'll come back, Teresa. One day they'll understand." "But when, Jose? How much time do we have left?" He had no answer. No one did. A week later, we received a court notice. Ricardo was filing for full custody of the children, claiming Sonia was mentally unstable for secretly bringing them to see us. He was also requesting a restraining order to prevent us from seeing our grandchildren. Dr. Mendez, our lawyer, tried to reassure us. "This is clearly retaliation. No judge will ban grandparents from seeing their grandchildren without a serious reason." But I wasn't so sure. I had seen the hatred in Ricardo's eyes. He would do anything to hurt us, even if it meant using his own children as weapons. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. We prepared as best we could, gathering testimonies about our character, about the quality of the Hogar Nueva Vida, about how well the children were treated during visits. Meanwhile, we heard nothing from Sonia or the grandchildren. Ricardo had cut off all contact, even changing phone numbers. On the eve of the hearing, we were in the kitchen of our apartment, trying to distract ourselves with dinner preparations. Clara and Paolo had gone out to buy the missing ingredients. The intercom buzzed, and Jose went to answer it. "Who is it?" he asked cautiously, as we had learned to do since the incidents with our children. "It's me, Dad Fernando." We exchanged looks of surprise and apprehension. Fernando, our youngest son, the most distant of the three, had never come to see us since the fallout. "What does he want?" I whispered to Jose. "I don't know. He says he needs to speak with us urgently." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to deny him entry to protect ourselves from more pain. But another part of me, the part that had never stopped being a mother, wanted to see my son. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, something had changed. "Let him up," I finally decided. Fernando looked different when he entered the apartment. Thinner, with deep eye bags and disheveled hair. He no longer carried that youthful arrogance that had always defined him. "Mom, Dad?" he mumbled, seeming unable to continue. "What do you want, Fernando?" I asked, keeping an emotional and physical distance. He sank into the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know where to begin." Jose sat down across from him, looking him straight in the eye. "How about the beginning? Why did you abandon us in that place?" Fernando lowered his head, running his hands through his hair in a nervous gesture I recognized from his childhood. "It was Claudia's idea at first. She said you were too much work, that you cost too much. Ricardo agreed immediately. Said it was the most logical solution." I hesitated. "I just went along with what they said. That's how it always was. And the letters I asked. The letters about the inheritance you all hid from us for years." Fernando looked up surprised. "You know about that?" "Of course we do. How do you think we found out about the money?" He took a deep breath. "It was Claudia who found the first letter. She showed it to Ricardo, and they decided to hide it. I only found out when you were already in the nursing home." "And even then, you did nothing," Jose observed, not accusatory, just stating a fact. "No," Fernando admitted. "I did nothing." A heavy silence fell between us. The air felt thick with decades of resentment, betrayal, and omission. "Why are you here now?" I finally asked. Fernando pulled a wrinkled envelope from his jacket pocket. "Ricardo is planning something. Something to try to take the money from you anyway. I heard him talking to a lawyer about—" He hesitated again. "About proving that you're mentally unfit." I felt a chill down my spine. How does he plan to prove that we're perfectly sane? He has a doctor willing to sign false reports. He's going to present them at the custody hearing tomorrow as evidence that you're dangerous to the kids." Jose turned pale. "He'd go that far? Use his own children like that?" Fernando nodded sadly. "You have no idea how obsessed he is with that money. He's not the Ricardo we knew anymore." I looked at the envelope in his hands. "What's this proof?" "Recordings of him discussing the plan. Copies of emails exchanged with the doctor. Even a draft of the false report. I took it all from his computer last night." I took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why? Why are you helping us now?" Fernando stayed silent so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally did, his voice broke. "Because I regret it. Every day I regret it. Not the money I lost, though. Yes, at first it was about that. But I regret not being man enough to stand up for you. For letting Claudia and Ricardo decide everything. For being a coward." Tears streamed freely down his face now, and he made no effort to hide them. "I know it's too late. I know you'll never forgive me. And I'm not even asking you to. I just don't want Ricardo to hurt anyone else. Not you, not Sonia, not the kids." Jose stood up slowly, and to my surprise, walked over to Fernando. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture I hadn't seen in so long. It felt like it belonged to another life. It's never too late to do the right thing, son. Fernando looked up, hope and disbelief warring in his tear-swollen eyes. At that moment, we heard the key turn in the door. Clara and Paulo had returned from shopping. When they saw Fernando, Paulo instinctively stepped in front of Clara in a protective stance. "What's he doing here?" Jose made a calming gesture. "It's okay, Paulo. He came to help us." Clara looked doubtful, grocery bags still in her hands. Help how I briefly explained the situation, while Jose took Fernando to the kitchen for some coffee. Paulo examined the envelope's contents, checking the documents for authenticity. "If this is real, the judge is going to eat Ricardo alive tomorrow," he commented, flipping through the pages. "It's real," Fernando said from the kitchen. "I was there when he planned it all. I can testify." Clara came over to me, concerned. "Are you okay with this, with him here?" I looked toward the kitchen where Jose and Fernando were speaking in hushed tones. There was so much history between us, so much pain, so much wasted love. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think it's a start." That night, Fernando slept on the living room sofa. Before we went to bed, he called out to me. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why Hogar Nueva Vida? Why use the money to help other elderly people instead of, I don't know, traveling the world, enjoying life?" The question caught me off guard, not because of the question itself, but because Fernando genuinely seemed interested. "Because we understand pain," I answered simply. "Because we know what it feels like to be abandoned, to be treated as disposable. And because we discovered that the best way to heal our own pain is by helping others heal theirs." Fernando nodded, slowly processing. "You're better people than we'll ever be. No, son. We just learned a few lessons the hard way." The next morning, we entered the courthouse prepared for battle. Dr. Mendez had worked through the night incorporating the new evidence into the case. Fernando walked with us, nervous but determined. Ricardo was already there with his lawyer, wearing the smug confidence of someone certain of victory. When he saw Fernando by our side, his face twisted into pure shock, quickly replaced by rage. "Traitor!" he hissed as we walked past. Fernando kept his head high, refusing to respond to the provocation. The hearing began with Ricardo's allegations painting a picture of mentally unstable grandparents, potentially dangerous to the children. His lawyer presented the infamous medical report, speaking with the authority of someone who held irrefutable proof. When it was our turn, Dr. Mendez stood calmly. Instead of directly refuting the claims, he requested permission to call a surprise witness. Fernando Mendez, son of the defendants and brother of the plaintiff. The judge, a middle-aged man with tired but attentive eyes, nodded his approval. Fernando walked to the witness chair, visibly shaking. He took the oath and looked straight at the judge, avoiding Ricardo's murderous glare. On the eve of the hearing, we were in the kitchen of our apartment, trying to distract ourselves by preparing dinner. Clara and Paulo had gone out to buy the missing ingredients. The intercom buzzed, and Jose went to answer. "Who is it?" he asked cautiously, as we had grown accustomed to doing since the incidents with the children. "It's me, Dad Fernando." We exchanged looks of surprise and apprehension. Fernando, our youngest son, the one who had been the most distant of the three, had never come to see us since everything collapsed. "What do you want?" I asked, maintaining emotional and physical distance. He sank into the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know where to start." Jose sat in the chair opposite him, looking directly in his eyes. "How about from the beginning? Why did you abandon us in that place?" Fernando lowered his head, running his hands through his hair in a nervous gesture I recognized from his childhood. "It was Claudia's idea at first. She said you were too much trouble, that you cost too much." Ricardo agreed immediately. Said it was the most logical solution. I doubted. I just followed what they said. It was always that way. and the letters I asked. The letters about the inheritance that you hid from us for years. Fernando lifted his gaze, surprised. You know about that? Of course we do. How do you think we found out about the money? He breathed deeply. It was Claudia who found the first letter. She showed it to Ricardo and they decided to keep it hidden. I only found out when you were already in the nursing home. And even then you did nothing. Jose asked, his voice more a statement than an accusation. No, Fernando admitted. I did nothing. A heavy silence fell over us. The air felt dense, laden with decades of resentment, betrayal, and omissions. Why are you here now? I asked at last. Fernando pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. Ricardo is planning something to try to take away your money anyway. I heard him talking to a lawyer about. He hesitated. About proving you are mentally unfit. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. How does he intend to prove that we're completely lucid? He has a doctor willing to sign false reports. He will present them at tomorrow's custody hearing as proof that you are dangerous for the children. Jose turned pale. Could he get to that point? Use his own children like that? Fernando nodded sadly. You have no idea how obsessed he is with that money. He is no longer the Ricardo we knew. I looked at the envelope in his hand. What is this proof? Recordings of him discussing the plan? Copies of emails exchanged with the doctor? Even a draft of the false report. I took it all from his computer last night. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Why help us now? Fernando stayed silent long enough that I feared he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was broken. Because I regret it. Every day I regret it. Not the money I lost, though. Yes, at first that's all I cared about. But I regret not having been strong enough to defend you. Letting Claudia and Ricardo decide everything. Being a coward. Tears streamed freely down his face, now no effort to hide them. I know it's too late. I know you'll never forgive me. And I'm not even asking. I don't want Ricardo to hurt anyone else. Not you, not Sonia, not the children. Jose rose with difficulty and, to my surprise, walked toward Fernando. He placed his hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture I hadn't seen in so long it felt from another life. It's never too late to do the right thing, son. Fernando looked up, hope and disbelief wrestling in his tear-soft eyes. At that moment, we heard the key turning in the door. Clara and Paulo had returned from shopping. Seeing Fernando, Paulo instinctively stepped in front of Clara, protective. What is he doing here? Clara asked, still holding the grocery bags. Jose made a calming gesture. It's okay, Paulo. He's here to help us. Clara looked at me in concern. How exactly? I briefly explained the situation while Jose took Fernando to the kitchen to get him some coffee. Paulo examined the envelope's contents, checking the legitimacy of the documents. If this is true, the judge is going to eat Ricardo alive tomorrow, he murmured, flipping through the papers. It's true, Fernando said from the kitchen. I was there when he planned it all. I can testify. Clara approached me worried. Are you okay with this, with him here? I looked toward the kitchen where Jose and Fernando spoke in low voices. There was so much history between us, so much pain, so much wasted love. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I think this might be a start. That night, Fernando slept on the couch in the living room. Before we went to bed, he called quietly. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Why Hogar Nueva Vida? Why use the money to help other elderly people instead of, I don't know, traveling the world, enjoying life? The question surprised me, not because of the doubt, but that Fernando seemed genuinely interested. Because we understand pain, I answered simply. Because we know what it is to be abandoned, to be treated like something disposable, and because we discovered that the best way to heal our own pain is by helping others heal theirs. Fernando nodded slowly. You are better people than we will ever be. No, son. We just learned a few lessons the hard way. The next morning, we went into court prepared for battle. Dr. Mendez had worked overnight, incorporating the new evidence into the case. Fernando walked with us nervous but resolved. Ricardo was already there with his lawyer, wearing the confidence of someone certain of victory. When he saw Fernando by our side, his face twisted with shock, quickly changing into rage. Traitor Ricardo hissed as we passed. Fernando kept his head high, refusing to respond. The hearing opened with Ricardo's allegations, painting a picture of mentally unstable grandparents, potentially dangerous to the kids. His lawyer presented the medical report with authority, as if it were undeniable proof. When it was our turn, Dr. Mendez stood calm. Rather than refuting directly, he asked the judge's permission to call a surprise witness. Fernando Mendez, son of the defendants and brother of the plaintiff. The judge, a middle-aged man with tired but alert eyes, nodded for him to do so. Fernando walked to the witness stand, visibly trembling. He took the oath and looked directly at the judge, avoiding Ricardo's murderous glare. I felt a pang of guilt, one I tried to push away. Ricardo had brought this upon himself with his choices. Do you have somewhere to go? If you need. Sonia interrupted me with a gesture. I'm not asking for money, Mrs. Teresa. I wanted you to know. Things are falling apart for him, for all of us, really. I looked at the children playing innocently with Fernando and Jose, so out of place amid this adult war. What are you going to do? She sighed deeply. I'm thinking of leaving him. He's not the man I married anymore. He's consumed by hate, by obsession. I hugged her instinctively. If you need anything, we're here. Later, when I told Jose about the conversation, he fell silent, thoughtful. Ricardo was always too proud, he said. That pride is going to destroy him if he doesn't change. What can we do? Jose looked out the window toward the city lights. Nothing, unfortunately. Everyone has to find their own way. We offered our forgiveness, our open door. The rest depends on him. 2 weeks later, Fernando showed up at our apartment earlier than usual with a pale face. What happened? I asked immediately, sensing something was wrong. It's Ricardo, he answered, sitting down heavily. He had an accident. He's in the hospital. Jose lowered the newspaper he was reading. What kind of accident? He crashed the car? He was drunk. Fernando ran his hands over his face. Sonia just called me. She said he's in ICU in critical condition. I felt the world shift. As much anger as I felt toward Ricardo, the idea of losing him was unbearable. We have to go to the hospital, I decided immediately. Jose nodded and rose to fetch his coat. Fernando looked surprised. Do you really want to go? After everything he did? Fernando, Jose said softly, when you have children, love never completely ends. It may get buried, it may transform, but it never disappears. At the hospital, we found Sonia, eyes swollen from crying. Miguel and Anina were with their maternal grandmother, shielded from the drama unfolding. The doctor informed us that Ricardo had suffered a traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding. Emergency surgery was performed, but the next 48 hours would be critical. Had he been so disturbed lately, Sonia explained. He started drinking early, was driving like a madman. The police who came said he crashed into a lamppost at over 100 km/h. We waited in the waiting room. Time dragged with the particular slowness that crisis brings. Fernando paced. Jose held my hand, both of us lost in silent thoughts and prayers. When the doctor returned, his expression serious, told us everything before he spoke. I'm sorry, he said simply. We did everything we could. Sonia collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Fernando leaned against the wall, as if his legs could no longer hold him. Jose hugged me tightly, and I felt his hot tears against my neck. I cried for the son I had lost twice, once to greed, once to death. I mourned the child he had been, and the man he might have become, had he made other choices. In the following days, in a blur, we arranged the funeral. Claudia appeared, her face marked not only by grief, but by fear. With Ricardo's death, the legal cases against him carried new weight. She was alone now, her brother no longer there to share the blame. When our eyes met in the cemetery, I saw something I had never seen before in my daughter's eyes: vulnerability. No more arrogance, no more calculation. Just a devastated woman facing the consequences of her choices. After the ceremony, when most people had left, Claudia approached tentatively. "Mama." Her voice was only a whisper. I don't know what to say. I looked at her, at this stranger who was my daughter. "Then don't say anything. Sometimes silence is better. I never wanted this to happen." "I mean, with Ricardo, nobody wanted it, Claudia. But our actions have consequences, often far beyond what we can foresee." She lowered her gaze, hands trembling slightly. "What will happen to me now?" The question caught me off guard, not for its content, but for the genuine vulnerability in it. "That depends partly on you," I answered honestly. "The legal processes will continue, but there is always space for repair, for change." Jose, who had come over quietly, added, "Our door is open, Claudia. It always has been. But you need to come in with an open heart, not with old intentions." She nodded, tears flowing silently. There were no hugs, no promises. Just that small opening, that possibility of a different path. In the car on the way home, Jose held my hand. "Do you think she will really change?" I asked. "I don't know," he answered with honesty. "But everyone deserves the chance to try." That night, looking through old family photos, our 3 young children smiling, not yet marked by the decisions they would later make, I felt a profound melancholy. So many possibilities, so many paths we might have taken. "Don't torture yourself, my love," Jose whispered, sitting beside me. "The past is gone. All we can do is build the future." I nodded, putting away the photo album. He was right, as always. The next day, we returned to our work at Hogar Nueva Vida. We would continue welcoming Fernando on his journey of redemption. We would continue offering Claudia the possibility of reconciliation. We would continue being grandparents to Miguel and Nina, support for Sonia. We would continue living, loving, forgiving. Because in the end, I discovered that true wealth isn't the millions in our bank account, but the ability to transform even the worst wounds into something that heals for ourselves and for others. 3 years have passed since Ricardo's death. Years of transformation, healing, and new beginnings. Hogar Nueva Vida has grown, now caring for 30 elderly residents. We bought the house next door and expanded the facilities, creating a wing specialized for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. Clara coordinates a team of 15 professionals implementing innovative care practices. Fernando found purpose in woodworking. What started as personal therapy blossomed into a vocation. He created a workshop to teach the craft not only to the elderly in the home, but to young people in vulnerable social situations. He said it was his way of making amends, helping to bridge generations that would normally never meet. Claudia, against all expectations, also found her own path toward redemption. The first months were hard. She performed community service as part of the judicial agreement for the crimes against us, working reluctantly at times in the home. I remember the day I saw her truly change. She was helping Doña Conchezón feed herself when the elderly woman confused Claudia with her own daughter, who rarely visited. Marina, how good that you came today, Doña Concepción said, holding Claudia's hand. I missed you so much. I saw my daughter freeze, unsure how to react. For a moment, I thought she'd correct the lady, maybe even with hardness. But to my surprise, Claudia smiled gently. I'm here now, she said simply, squeezing the elder's hand. How are you feeling today? When Doña Concepción fell asleep after lunch, Claudia left the room, visibly moved. I found her in the garden, crying quietly. Me llamó hija, murmuró cuando me acerqué. Cree que su hija la abandonó como nosotros hicimos con ustedes. No dije nada, solo me senté a su lado en el banco. Nunca había entendido realmente lo que les hicimos. Puse mi mano sobre la suya. Ahora lo entiendes. Es horrible, susurró ella. ¿Cómo pudimos hacer eso? ¿Cómo pude hacer eso con mis propios padres? Esa tarde marcó el inicio de la verdadera transformación de Claudia. Comenzó a ser voluntaria en el hogar, incluso después de cumplir su condena. Volvió a estudiar, graduándose en gerontología. Hoy coordina un programa de apoyo a cuidadores familiares, ayudando a personas que enfrentan el desafío de cuidar a parientes ancianos en casa. Nuestra relación nunca volvió a ser lo que era antes. Algunas fracturas son demasiado profundas para sanar por completo. Pero encontramos un nuevo equilibrio, un respeto mutuo nacido del dolor compartido y de la sanación buscada juntas. Sonia se mudó a un apartamento cerca del nuestro con Miguel y a Niña. Los niños crecieron teniendo abuelos presentes viniendo a visitarnos casi a diario después de la escuela. Miguel, ahora con 13 años, pasaba horas en el taller con Fernando, aprendiendo los secretos de la carpintería. A Niña, a los 10, prefería el jardín donde ayudaba a José a cultivar flores y verduras que abastecían la cocina del hogar. José y yo, a los 75 y 72 años, encontramos una paz que nunca imaginamos posible después del trauma del abandono. Usamos la mayor parte de la herencia para crear una fundación que financia hogares para ancianos éticos en todo el país, estableciendo estándares rigurosos de cuidado y dignidad. Una tarde de domingo, estábamos todos reunidos para el almuerzo. José y yo, Fernando y su novia Mariana, una enfermera que conoció en el hogar Claudia, que venía sola, todavía no lista para nuevas relaciones. Sonia con los niños, Clara y Paulo con su hija pequeña Elena. La mesa estaba llena, las conversaciones eran animadas, las risas de los niños, una escena que parecía imposible años atrás. Después del almuerzo, mientras los demás conversaban en la sala, José me llamó al balcón. El atardecer pintaba el cielo de naranja y rosa, una vista que nunca dejaba de emocionarme. ¿En qué estás pensando?, pregunté notando su mirada distante. Él sonrió, esa sonrisa que conocía tan bien después de 53 años de matrimonio. En los viajes. En cómo a veces necesitamos perdernos por completo para encontrar el camino correcto. Apoyé la cabeza en su hombro, sintiendo la comodidad familiar de su cuerpo contra el mío. ¿Quién diría que nuestro peor momento se transformaría en nuestra mayor bendición? El abandono no fue la bendición, corrigió él gentilmente. Fue lo que elegimos hacer con él. En ese momento, con la luz dorada del final de la tarde, iluminando su rostro arrugado, José parecía más sabio y hermoso que nunca. Sus manos, ahora más temblorosas por la edad, aún sostenían las mías con la misma firmeza de cuando éramos jóvenes. ¿Sabes qué me da más paz?, continuó. Ver que rompimos el ciclo. Miguel y a Niña están creciendo viendo el valor de las personas mayores, aprendiendo que el amor no es condicional. Asentí, observando a nuestros nietos a través de la ventana. Miguel le mostraba a Claudia un pequeño tallado de madera que había hecho y ella lo elogiaba sinceramente. A Niña dibujaba algo en su cuaderno, probablemente otro de los retratos que le gustaba hacer de todos los ancianos del hogar. Ellos no van a abandonar a sus padres cuando envejezcan, comenté, ni a sus propios hijos cuando llegue su turno. José asintió. Y eso vale más que los 20 millones. Nos quedamos allí en silencio cómodo viendo el sol ponerse, pensando en las lecciones que la vida nos enseñó de la manera más dura, que el verdadero valor no está en el dinero o las posesiones, sino en el amor que damos y recibimos, que las heridas más profundas pueden convertirse en fuentes de sanación, que nunca es demasiado tarde para empezar de nuevo. Una semana después, José tuvo un derrame mientras trabajaba en el jardín del hogar. Fue rápido y sin dolor, dijeron los médicos. Partió haciendo lo que amaba rodeado de personas que lo respetaban y admiraban. El funeral fue diferente al de Ricardo. No solo había familia, sino decenas de ancianos del hogar, empleados vecinos, personas cuyas vidas habían sido tocadas por José de alguna manera. Cada uno tenía una historia que contar sobre su amabilidad, su sabiduría, su capacidad para perdonar incluso las peores ofensas. Fernando organizó que cada anciano del hogar plantara un árbol en memoria de José, creando un pequeño bosque en la parte trasera de la propiedad. Un lugar donde la gente podrá sentarse y sentir su presencia, explicó. Como todos la sentíamos cuando él estaba en el jardín. Claudia coordinó un memorial donde se exhibieron cientos de fotos de José, no solo las antiguas con nuestra familia original, sino principalmente las nuevas, mostrándolo en su misión en el hogar, con la nueva familia que habíamos construido. Los primeros meses sin él fueron los más difíciles de mi vida. Ni siquiera el abandono de los hijos había dolido tanto como esta ausencia definitiva. Cada mañana me despertaba buscando instintivamente su presencia a mi lado, solo para encontrar el vacío. Lo que me salvó fue el propósito que habíamos construido juntos. El hogar Los Ancianos, la fundación Nuestra Familia Reconstruida, todo necesitaba continuar. José lo habría querido así. Una tarde, 6 meses después de su partida, estaba sentada en el jardín que él había creado. Los árboles plantados en su memoria aún eran pequeños, pero ya mostraban los primeros brotes primaverales. Miguel vino a sentarse a mi lado, ahora casi de mi altura. Abuela, comenzó él vacilante. ¿Puedo preguntarte algo? Claro, mi amor. ¿No odias a mi papá por todo lo que hizo? La pregunta me tomó por sorpresa. Miguel rara vez hablaba de Ricardo como si el trauma de la pérdida hubiera convertido el tema en tabú. No, Miguel, respondí honestamente, no lo odio. Lo odié por un tiempo. Pero descubrí que el odio solo me lastimaba a mí, no a él. ¿Pero cómo pudiste perdonar? Después de todo miré el rostro joven de mi nieto, que ya mostraba rasgos del hombre que sería algún día, y elegí mis palabras con cuidado. Perdonar no significa olvidar o fingir que el daño no sucedió. Significa elegir no dejar que el rencor controle tu vida. Tu padre cometió errores terribles, pero también era una persona compleja con sus propios dolores y limitaciones. Miguel se quedó en silencio absorbiendo. Lo que aprendí, Miguel, es que la vida es demasiado corta para vivirla con rabia. Tu abuelo José solía decir que el rencor es como beber veneno, esperando que el otro muera. El niño sonrió levemente, reconociendo el tipo de sabiduría que su abuelo solía compartir. Lo extraño, dijo en voz baja. Yo también, mi amor. Todos los días. Nos quedamos allí sentados, abuela y nieto, compartiendo el silencio cómodo, que solo existe cuando hay verdadera comprensión. Observé los árboles jóvenes balanceándose con la brisa ligera, y pensé en todas las vidas que aún se beneficiarían de la sombra que algún día ofrecerían. Así como tantas personas se beneficiaban del legado que José y yo habíamos construido a partir de nuestro dolor. La vida continúa su ciclo con pérdidas y ganancias, abandonos y acogimientos finales y nuevos comienzos. Lo importante, descubrí finalmente, es la elección que hacemos ante cada golpe, ante cada herida, dejar que nos endurezcan y amarguen o usarlas como fuente de sabiduría y compasión. José y yo elegimos el segundo camino, y aunque él ya no esté aquí para ver los frutos, sé que su esencia vive en cada rincón del hogar, nueva vida, en cada sonrisa de un anciano que recuperó la dignidad, en cada abrazo de nuestros nietos, en cada gesto de redención de nuestros hijos. Nuestros hijos nos tiraron como basura, creyendo que éramos solo una carga. No sabían que estaban descartando no solo $20 millones, sino el amor más valioso que podrían haber recibido. Algunos aprendieron la lección a tiempo, otros lamentablemente no. En cuanto a mí, continúo mi viaje agradecida por cada día, por cada recuerdo, por cada oportunidad de transformar el dolor en propósito. No sé cuánto tiempo más me queda en esta vida, pero sé que cuando llegue mi hora de partir, no dejaré solo dinero o propiedades. Dejaré un legado de perdón, de reconstrucción, de amor, que persiste a pesar de las peores traiciones. Un legado que vale mucho más que $20 millones.